Hi, I'm David Johnson. I'm pastor here at New Tabor Brethren Church in Caldwell, Texas, and this is Bible Boost. Now today I'm going to talk about a series that I've been doing called The God of Miracles. And the title of this one is Lift Up Your Hands. Now let's talk again about the anatomy of a miracle. Okay? It begins with God's promise. He promises us, and then He gives us instructions in how to achieve the miracle, and then we are to obey. And after we obey, we will see deliverance. A lot of people think that God has stopped performing miracles because we don't see them in our current culture the way that we read about them in the Bible. The fact of the matter is, God hasn't changed, we have. He still performs miracles, especially in the mission field when people have the faith of a child. God's doing great things, but for us, you know, we seem to be a little lack. Now, let's talk about really quick a story of Elisha and Naaman. You remember this from Sunday school about how that Naaman had come down with leprosy. He was a general in the Syrian army, and he goes and someone says, hey, you know, there's a godly man, there's a prophet in Israel that can heal you. So he goes to Israel, gets there, and Elisha doesn't even come out to see him. Elisha sends a message out, his servant Gehazi, and says, listen, go and dip 7 times in the river Jordan. Well, that bothered Naaman because number one, Elisha didn't come out in person and see him. Number two, here's 2 other rivers in Damascus, Syria, that were cleaner than the Jordan. And Naaman's servant said, look, what's it going to hurt? We're here. This is God's man. Let's just do what he says. He does what he says. And in the 7th dip, he comes up completely clean and healed. We're just like Naaman. God tells us, gives us a promise that he's going to do something. And then we begin to try to figure out how and why God's going to do what he's going to do. Well, God, why do I need to go there? Why can't I do this? Well, God, it won't hurt anything if we do this and this. That's not part of the anatomy of a miracle. The anatomy of a miracle is for us to obey the instruction that God has promised us, the miracle, and then we'll see the deliverance. In the wilderness, Moses and Joshua, they had just come out of Egypt, and they had just come off the mountain, and they faced the Amalekites. The Amalekites were sworn enemies of Israel, worse than the Philistines. And unprovoked, they just attack Israel. So God tells Moses, he says, get Joshua, choose men, and go out and fight them. Well, Moses was told to go out there too with his staff and to raise his hands and the staff over the battlefield. And as long as Moses' hands were up, Israel prevailed. But as soon as his hands began to come down, the Amalekites began to prevail. So Joshua and Aaron and Hur came and lifted Moses' hands back up. And when that happened, Israel began again to overcome. And they held his arms up, gave him a place to sit down where he's comfortable until even. And at evening, that's when the battle ended with Israel subduing the Amalekites. So we say, well, why do we need to lift our hands? Listen, God says to do it, just do it. Why would we need an explanation? One of the things I got in more trouble with when I was a child is asking why. Mom or Dad would say, David, I need you to do this, do that. Why? Well, that usually got me in trouble. And it gets us in trouble now. Our job is to obey, and God does everything else. See, we raise our hands to bless our children. We raise our hands to install elders here in the church. We raise our hands to pray for the sick as we lay our hands upon them. We raise our hands to worship God in the assembly of His believers. We do that. And we also raise hands to celebrate victory. We do this everywhere in our culture, whether it is in the sporting arenas, politics, everywhere. So there's something to raising your hands. When we're praying, it's symbolic of our hands being raised. Scripture tells us in 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16 and 17, rejoice always, pray continually. King James says, pray without ceasing. So when you pray, your enemies are subdued. When you stop praying, you are subdued by your enemies. So when we're praying, our hands are lifted up, we're winning. When our hands come down, the enemy begins to win. It's just that simple. Again, obedience brings deliverance. So today, this week, in your life, I want to encourage you, keep your hands up. Okay? God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Bible Boost.